It's looking increasingly likely that Joe Biden might be replaced for the 2024 Democratic presidential nominee, as he currently only holds a 47 cents per share number unpredicted, which means the majority of people believe Joe Biden will be replaced. In fact, at one point today, Kamala Harris had a 57% chance of being the Democratic nominee for president, which would be disastrous news for the Democratic Party, as Kamala Harris has the lowest approval rating of any vice president in American history, and there will be a lot of infighting among Democrats to see who will end up replacing Biden at the top of the ticket. So in today's going to Kamala Harris's likely states here. First off, in the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado voted for Joe Biden by 13.5% in 2020. And although that margin is going to get eroded down substantially by Donald Trump in 2024, a 13-point deficit is just too much to overcome, as Donald Trump probably needs to win a county like Adams, which he lost by like 16% in 2020. Furthermore, again, although Trump is overperforming substantially, according to the national polling, he leads Joe Biden by 2. That's still not reflective of what he needs to win a state like Colorado, and therefore I'm going to give it to Kamala Harris here by a likely margin. The next state here in the likely Democratic column, the state of New Mexico. Honestly, New Mexico at this point could even be a lean state because of the fiasco the Democrats will have to go through with replacing Joe Biden on the ballot, and the fact that the state of New Mexico is a border state where immigration is a more prominent issue. We honestly could see areas like Bernalillo County or even Santa Fe County trend slightly towards the Republican Party, and the rural areas are definitely going to consolidate for Donald Trump. Because again, many of these counties actually improved for Trump despite the fact that he ended up losing the state by a larger margin than in 2016. And if you just applied this type of polling change here from about a Joe Biden plus 4.5% margin to about a Donald Trump plus 2% margin, you will actually see the state of New Mexico in the lean Democratic column, not likely, but I'm still reluctant to put the state as lean. Right now, it's still in the likely Kamala Harris column. Now we're just going to go down state. It was a state that Hillary Clinton, I mind you, actually won in 2016. Right now in the state of Nevada, Trump has about a 4% lead. Prior to the debate here, Joe Biden was eroding part of that advantage as the point of lead for Donald Trump began to diminish to about 3%, but now it has rebounded a little bit more back to 4 points, which is pretty much outside the margin of error. Also, the state of Nevada here is a state that is trending heavily towards the Republican Party. Again, Clark County actually trended 1.4% towards Donald Trump in 2020, despite the fact that Trump did about 2 points worse on a national-wide level. Just because of infighting, because of there's a lot of Latino voters trending away from the Democratic Party in the state of Nevada, I'm going to put it in the lean Republican column. Next up, the state of Arizona here. Now, the state of Arizona is still very much in contention for both sides, but Trump has again opened up a bit of an advantage in the state of Arizona. He leads Joe Biden by 5.7%, and you can just imagine how poorly Kamala Harris will do in such a situation. In the most recent polls by North Star Opinion Research and P2 Insights, I mind that is a Republican-funded poll, they do show significant advantages for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And there's actually a lot of voters who are reluctant to vote for Harris, who might even back Biden at this point. So it's definitely not looking too good for Biden, considering he only won the state by 0.3%, and Harris is definitely not going to do a lot better than Biden. If anything, I'd argue slightly worse. She's not very appealable to those moderate voters who held their nose, voted for Joe Biden, despite the fact that they were Republicans back in 2020. You're going to see none of that at this point, and therefore, although there's a lot of McCain Republicans in Arizona, the state historically has been more Republican, and I'm going to give the state right now towards Donald Trump by a lean characterization. The next state here, the state of Georgia. Georgia has a substantial African American vote. However, this election has been pretty much brutal for Joe Biden. If you look at the polling aggregate here in the state of Georgia, you can see that, again, Biden's doing extremely poorly in Georgia. Trump has a 7.2% lead. And even if you give every single undecided voter to Joe Biden, Trump is not even trailing Biden even if you do that. And the fact is, polling has looked so miserable for Biden in the post-debate polls, specifically by Emerson, P2 Insights, and also the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's just not looking too good for President Biden at this point. Kamala Harris being his vice president, being someone who really isn't approved of by a lot of Americans, just isn't going to win the state, right? Biden won the state by 0.23% with everything going right for him. And in fact, Republicans can win a state like Georgia. Brian Kemp defeated Stacey Abrams in the state in the midterms in 2020 by nearly 8 percentage points. Although I don't think Trump will replicate that performance, I do believe that he'll end up doing quite well in the state, and the fact is polling does support that, and the state of Georgia, historically polling-wise, has been incredibly accurate. In 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, and 2022, the most the state has missed in a statewide race is 2 points in a polling aggregate by FiveThirtyEight. Even if you adjusted the state 2 points to the Democratic Party, still, right, the state still goes and ends up going to Donald Trump by pretty much a likely margin. Right now, I'm going to put the state as lean, but it could very well go to a likely state for Donald Trump, boosting him up to 267 Electoral College votes. The next state here, the state of Minnesota here, it's a state that historically has been more friendly for Democrats. Even Walter Mondale won the state, despite pretty much losing in a 49 state to one state landslide back in 1984. However, polling recently has been more brutal to the Democratic Party in the state of Minnesota as well. Joe Biden did hold a lead consistently and still does hold a lead, but I mean, the more recent polls showed Trump with an advantage over Biden, despite the fact previously consistently Biden held an edge over Trump, albeit a narrow advantage. Kennedy has also surged in the more recent aggregate, which is not the good news for the incumbent. And in this case, the incumbent is Joe Biden, showing strong disaffection from the Democratic Party towards the incumbent president. Furthermore, there was a extremely high uncommitted vote in the state, and it's really going to come down to the wire. However, the state did vote for Biden by about 240,000 votes back in 2020, which is a bit too much for perhaps Trump to overcome in a state that he actually lost by closer to 7 points in 2020. Now, the state will most certainly be competitive, and I really think that Kamala Harris is not the candidate that can do well in the suburbs, such as Anoka County, Dakota County, or Washington County, and I also think that she will antagonize some voters in the rural areas to vote against her and in favor of President Donald Trump. However, that being said, I still believe Kamala Harris will probably end up prevailing in the state of Minnesota, albeit only by a tilt margin, not the most impressive for a Democrat. Now the next state here, the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin was actually looking pretty decent for Biden in terms of the fact that he was narrowing Trump's lead, and at one point he actually overtook Trump for several days. However, post-debate, like all the other states, it has been a disaster for Joe Biden. Sure, Biden actually leads in one of the more recent polls, but post-debate, this is essentially what you're seeing, right? Trump with an advantage over Biden, and mind you not, Biden was seen as this very strong candidate for these Midwestern states, the Rust Belt states, back in 2020. And Democrats really don't have a lot of room to deplete here. Trump may have lost a few voters due to January 6th, and in fact, he probably did. But Joe Biden has lost significantly more voters with inflation, with the economy, with the border issues, and with the international relations issues surrounding the Israel-Hamas war. Bottom line here, Democrats don't have a lot of votes to lose in a state like Wisconsin, where abortion sure was a top issue in 2022, resulted in Democratic overperformances compared to the expectations. But in 2024, the emphasis just isn't there for the Democratic Party on an issue like abortion. There's a lot more voters interested on an issue like the economy or immigration that would end up hurting Joe Biden's chances of winning or retaining the state. Kamala Harris is an even worse candidate compared to Joe Biden in a state like Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, as Joe Biden has that working class connection in a state like in the county of Scranton, Pennsylvania, while Kamala Harris simply does not. And therefore, right now, I'm going to give the state to Donald Trump here by a lead margin over Kamala Harris because of her inelectability, as well as the fact of a lot of Democrats just being disaffected with the Democratic Party in general. Now going to the state of Michigan, where Democrats do have some room to lose in that state. Joe Biden won the state by 2.8%. However, I'm just going to remind you here that Joe Biden faced a 100,000 vote uncommitted protest vote in the state of Michigan back in 2024 Democratic primaries. We mainly saw that from Wayne County as well as Washtenaw County, where a lot of younger voters were protesting Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war, saying that Joe Biden should have been more supportive towards Palestine. Now, Kamala Harris is a different candidate from Joe Biden, but the same argument holds. Many young voters are disaffected with Biden, and they really want to vote for someone like the libertarian candidates, or the Green Party candidate Joe Stein, or the independent Cornel West. Generally, a higher third-party vote is a bad sign for the incumbent, as said by Professor Alan Lichtman, the developer for the 13 Keys to the White House model, a pretty accurate model in terms of predicting general elections. In the state of Michigan here, Joe Biden also at one point overtook Donald Trump in the polling aggregate right before the debates. However, Biden has plummeted ever since. Now Trump holds a 2.5% lead, and in the most recent polls, you can see that Joe Biden has not led in a single one of them. In fact, Trump is the one who has led in every single one of these most recent polls, suggesting that Biden really isn't doing very well. And the fact is, Kamala Harris is Biden's VP, and the fact is, Kamala Harris is not very good of a candidate in terms of just the Rust Belt appeal. We're really going to see at this point that Kamala Harris will do worse than Joe Biden and not better. As a result, I'm going to give the state to Donald Trump here by about 2% margin, or just enough on the cusp of a lean margin. Now I'm going to get Nebraska second out of the way here. This is the more urban, educated district that's heavily trended towards the Democratic Party ever since essentially Donald Trump got in office. About 30 years ago, this was a safe Republican district. Now it's turning into a lean Democratic district. Biden won a district by 7 in 2020, and although redistricting has hurt the Democrats slightly in this district, the district largely remains the same. I do believe Kamala Harris will narrowly win it, just because how much the district has trended towards the Democratic Party since essentially 2010. I'm just going to give the district here to Kamala Harris by a tilt margin. Now going to the state of Virginia, and even in a state like Virginia, recent polling has been disastrous for the Democratic Party. We're just going to head on to the state of Virginia here. In the state of Virginia, the more recent polls show this race essentially at an even number. Fox News showing an even result here, and in fact, there were some more recent polls that are not featured on 538 that showed Biden actually trailing Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris, in my opinion, will do even worse with the suburbanites around the Washington, D.C. suburbs of Fairfax County, as well as Loudoun County and Prince William County. Now, what will happen? We have to end up just at this point anticipating those results, but nevertheless here it can be expected that this race will narrow down. However, Trump just does not have that type of appeal in these suburban areas. Many voters will still hold their nose and vote for Kamala Harris, although they don't really like her. And although the margin will tighten, I do believe it's still going to be a lean state for Kamala Harris, probably closer to a likely margin than to a tilt margin, about 4 to 5 point win for Kamala Harris. Now going to the state of Pennsylvania here. Now in the state of Pennsylvania here, again, Democrats don't have much of a cushion in Pennsylvania. Joe Biden only won the state by 1.2% against Donald Trump. And since then, there has been a lot more registered Republicans in the state, thanks to Josh Shapiro, the Democratic governor of the state, essentially allowing everyone to register by mail to vote in elections. Now, that's not really just to say that the state has shifted that much in a short period of time, but accumulatively, there has been a lot more Republicans registering than a lot more Democrats just leaving their party because they support Donald Trump. Trump has a very strong base in the state. In 2020, pretty much everything went wrong for Donald Trump, and he still got 48.8% of the vote in Pennsylvania. This time round, everything is going poorly for the Democratic Party. Democrats really don't have much to lose either, much of a buffer in the state to begin with, and Democrats have lost a lot of support over the past couple of years, especially because of the entire economy's fiasco, the fact that prices are up an average of about 25%, and the fact that the border is in a crisis. So at the end of the day, at this point, I do have Donald Trump winning the state of Pennsylvania here by a lead margin, about 2% as well, just because Democrats don't have much of a cushion. Unlike someone like Barack Obama did back in 2012, he still won the election because he had built a cushion in these types of states, the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and even Ohio and Iowa. This time around, Democrats just don't have that advantage in their bag. Now, finally, going to the state of New Hampshire, a recently released poll in the state of New Hampshire actually showed that the Democratic Party was trailing Trump was leading Joe Biden. The first poll ever that showed Donald Trump ahead. Sure, there were a couple of polls that showed Nikki Haley above Joe Biden, but that's kind of irrelevant. The state is essentially a quote-unquote live free or die state, and the fact is, Joe Biden's not doing very well in the state. Biden won the state by 7 in 2020, but again, a lot of college-educated voters, they might have liked Biden more in 2020 because they feel like he was the more educated person, and they felt like that he was he was generally more like the average politician, someone they perceive to be more reliable, but someone like Kamala Harris without much political experience is someone that many New Hampshire voters may not actually like, and as a result, you could see Donald Trump end up flipping the state against Kamala Harris. Nevertheless, here Hillary Clinton won the state, and Biden did significantly better, especially in the more college-educated towns such as Manchester, Nashua, and Concord, and as a result, I'm still going to give the narrow advantage here to Kamala Harris, albeit not by a large margin, because Kamala Harris is not a very popular candidate. Finally, we go to the state of Maine here. Maine second will be likely for the Republican Party, if not safe. Now, the first district is likely Democrat, the second district is likely Republican, so how will the statewide electorate end up going? Now, the state of Maine, we generally have not seen a lot of polling there because it was always assumed that Democrats were just going to win the state of Maine. After all, Biden won the state by 9 in 2020. However, if you just look at the pre-debate polls, Joe Biden was already not doing very well in the state, And the fact was, at one point, a poll suggested Trump was up by 6. Although I believe that that is disingenuous to believe that, I do believe the state is tightening. And in fact, a hot take by me is that Trump could end up actually winning the state against Biden, and Kamala Harris is generally just a worse candidate than Joe Biden. I actually believe Kamala Harris might win the state, despite the fact that a state like Colorado, New Mexico, or Virginia is pretty solidly in the Democratic column. Nevertheless, here, I need to see a bit more evidence before giving the state to Donald Trump. At this point, Kamala Harris still retains the state by a tilt margin. So this is the end of the map here. Donald Trump at 312, Kamala Harris at 226. Unlike most videos where I say that Joe Biden or a Democratic nominee could still end up flipping the map if they do everything right, or even most things right at one point, and the fact that the election can change, right now, just based on the entire fiasco and disaster for the Democratic Party, many Democratic analysts and many reporters on more Democratic-leaning shows like CNN or MSNBC have also echoed the fact that Joe Biden does not seem to be in the best position, and the Democrats are getting shattered across the board. I do believe that Trump is currently heavily favored to win the election as of right now, especially against Kamala Harris. I believe Kamala Harris, at least if the election was held today, stands little to no chance, and even if the election is held in November, Donald Trump is the clear favorite. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.